Welcome to another edition of Ed Cycles. I'm your host, Ed. Today I'm on the shore of Lake Toho in Kissimmee, Florida. I'll be exploring Kissimmee and St. Cloud by utilizing the Kissimmee Loop Trail, the Lakefront Trail, the Neptune Road Trail that goes down to St. Cloud, and then looping through St. Cloud and coming back. The city of Kissimmee is located approximately 16 miles due south of the city of Orlando. Today's route begins on the shore of Lake Toho and goes along city streets for several blocks to get to the Kissimmee Loop Trail. Here I'll take a brief stop to see the Osceola County Courthouse, then cycle along Patrick Road. At this point, I'll utilize the Emory Canal Trail to join the Kissimmee Loop Trail at MLK Jr. Boulevard. The Kissimmee Loop Trail goes past the Kissimmee Gateway Airport and then enters Shingle Creek Park. I'll make a stop at the Osceola County Welcome Center and History Museum. Continuing, the trail exits Shingle Creek Park and goes east through residential areas to the impressive pedestrian bicycle bridge over the John Young Parkway. At this point, I leave the Kissimmee Loop Trail to cycle on local streets with a stop in the commercial district of downtown Kissimmee. I'll stop to visit the Monument of States and the Bataan-Corregidor Memorial before continuing on the trail along the shore of Lake Toho that continues seamlessly onto the Neptune Road Trail. Unfortunately, my ride was cut short by a roadway improvement project. More on that later. I then returned back to my starting point for a total of 16.6 miles. I'm going to start today's mileage counter at the parking lot here in front of the marina. A short bike ride gets me to my starting point today at the ample parking lot in front of the marina. Starting the mileage marker here in the parking lot. It's a great day for a bike ride. From the parking lot in front of the marina, I'll go about 3 blocks and turn left. I'm cycling up Beaumont Avenue and will go 1 block past Patrick Street to turn left onto West Bryan Street. I'm cycling on Bryan Street specifically to get a closer look at the Osceola County Courthouse. This courthouse construction began in 2001. The clock tower is an interesting focal point for the building. This architectural style is considered to be contemporary / neoclassical. The original courthouse, also known as the historical courthouse, was constructed across the street in 1889 and is now on the National Register of Historic Places. The historic courthouse is the oldest courthouse in Florida that is still in continuous use as a courthouse. Unfortunately, I was so impressed by the newer courthouse that it did not take any photos of the original courthouse, but it is located across the street on the right-hand side. At the end of the block, go left on Rose and then right on Patrick. Go straight for 7.5 blocks. Now turning left onto Rose Avenue for 1 block and right onto Patrick Street. This is the intersection with John Young Parkway. Looks like there is a bike lane here on the west side of John Young Parkway. All the streets that I've been on so far are very low volume, traffic volume streets. I turn right here to get onto the Emory Avenue Canal Trail. Follow the Emory Avenue Canal Trail up to MLK Jr. Boulevard to get onto the Kissimmee Loop Trail. A distance of about 1/2 of a mile will get me up to the Kissimmee Loop Trail along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. While Kissimmee is well known for its proximity to a multitude of theme parks, the city rose to prominence in the late 1800s because of a dredging and land speculation business owned by Hamilton Diston of Philadelphia. This business of dredging is for the purpose of steamboat operations to transport people and goods, but it was short-lived as railroads expanded their routes. Citrus and cattle ranches then took over as the main industry for the area. After Disney World began operation in 1971, tourism quickly rose to prominence. Now I'll follow the Kissimmee Loop Trail as it takes me past the Kissimmee Airport and into Shingle Creek Park. Immediately after crossing US 192, I'll make a stop at the Osceola County Welcome Center and History Museum. Today, the city of Kissimmee has over 22 square miles and a population of nearly 80,000 as per the 2020 census. It is the county seat and the largest city in Osceola County. Osceola County was created in 1887 from portions of Orange County and Brevard County. I'm now riding along the edge of the Kissimmee Airport property. The Kissimmee Gateway Airport property consists of 892 acres, and it has a 5,000-foot runway and a 6,000-foot runway. Initially opened in 1940 as the Kissimmee Army Airfield, it began civilian operations in 1945. This airport is a public airport and the site of many general aviation operations. However, there are no commercial airline flights in or out of this airport. The Shingle Creek Regional Park begins up ahead at the tree line. Though I didn't make any turns from what I understand back at Hoagland Boulevard, when I went across it, I crossed over from the Kissimmee Loop Trail to the Shingle Creek Trail. So I'll be on the Shingle Creek Trail for some distance, and then we'll get back onto the Kissimmee Loop Trail, but it'll all be seamlessly. Going straight ahead here will put me on to US 192. There's a bike trail that goes along there for a short distance. On today's route, I want to go to the left and continue on the Shingle Creek Trail and cross under US 192. Just on the other side of US 192 and to the right is the Osceola County Welcome Center and History Museum. The Welcome Center and History Museum is open every day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. However, it is closed on New Year's Day, Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. Admission is always free. Per their website, the mission of Osceola History is to collect, preserve, and share the county's history, promoting the area's cultural and natural heritage. Upon entering the building, I met Stephen Owens, the education manager for Osceola History, and he was gracious enough to give me a personal tour around the museum.
Welcome to the Osceola County History Museum. We tell the story of the history of Osceola County, which formed as a county in 1887. And so we kind of start here in our swamp. We have 4 or 5 rooms, 4 dioramas that tell the natural history of the county and then the human history as it mixes in with that. So starting here in the swamp, cypress swamp, of course, filled with cypress trees and all the plants and animals typical of the cypress swamp, but it also tells the story of the indigenous people. We have had people living in Florida for at least 12,000 years. Our oldest artifact is actually the spearhead down here dated around 8,000 BC or so. And the natives, of course, made good use of the land and the products here. Another interesting artifact I'll point out is this canoe. Back here was a canoe from, they estimate the 1700s. And it was found in 1972 in Reedy Creek, and they brought it here to the museum. So it tells the story of, again, some of the natives, the more recent natives and the Seminoles, and that story is then brought out over here with the influx of the European explorers, the Spanish and French and so forth that came in, and then the naturalists that came into the area, and then of course wherever you have people encroaching on other people's land, you had the conflicts that developed. So we had the Seminole Wars that lasted all through the first part of the 19th century. But today the Seminoles are located primarily down in southern Florida, although we do have some in Tampa and over in the Daytona area and so forth. But they're very well known for their crafts and beadwork and the tourism industry that they have in their culture. Then after this diorama, we move into the next phase of the museum, which tells the story of the economic draws that brought people more and more into Florida. So we have the timber industry, and then related to that was the turpentine industry from the early 1920s or so. At one time, Florida was the second largest producer of turpentine in the world back in the day. Cattle is still big in the area, but a lot of the cattle that originated here were the ones such as the cracker cow back there with the tag on his ear. That was a remnant of the leftovers left by the Spanish explorers. But then other more modern breeds, the Brahman and so forth, were brought in. But the cattle industry was very big. We had, at one point in the 1940s, we had the largest cattle ranch east of the Mississippi, the Henry Parton Ranch, and it's still a big ranch over there today. We also have, of course, the agriculture in the area, the citrus and the sugar cane and the pineapple and bananas, all that was grown here. But all of these products that brought people to Florida, of course, the products themselves were the attraction, but then you had to have a way to get those products to where buyers would be, because the producers came, but the buyers, the consumers, were not here. And so they had to then come up. That's our next section, is the transportation area. We had three main aspects of transportation with these products. You had these steamboats, which our gift shop here is a mock-up of one of the river boats there, operated by Clay Johnson. He's talked about in here. There's a mock-up of him over on the other side. But not only with the river boats that were on the natural rivers, but you had Hamilton Diston, who is quite a character. He's not native to Florida. He's actually was a Philadelphia entrepreneur. He inherited a saw business from his father, the Diston Saw Blade Company. But he started expanding. Once he took the company, he started expanding. One of his big ventures was to come down to Florida, and he struck a deal with the state of Florida in the 1870s in which he wanted to purchase 4 million acres of swamp, and at the cost of 25 cents an acre. So he paid $1 million for 4 million acres of swamp. And then he brought in his dredging equipment, which is actually told about over here, and started dredging canals that connected many of the lakes. Central Florida has a lot of lakes. And so the canals that he constructed then did two things. It opened up passageways for riverboats to be able to more efficiently transport their products, but it also served to drain the swamps. Now, today we don't look on that very favorably, but he ended up successfully draining about 2 million acres of swamp land. And so he turned that around, and the land then that he bought for 25 cents an acre, he sold all the way up to about $25 an acre. So turned a pretty good profit. He would have done better if he hadn't diversified so much. He had other industries, sugarcane and so forth, that didn't do so well for him. And so he ended up actually not making as much money as you would think. But anyway, so we had the transportation develop, and of course the railroad came in and further developed the market to be able to ship things up to the northern states and so forth. So we talk a little bit about that in our museum. So you had the early swamps, so the early indigenous people, then you had more and more of the products getting to market, the transportation. Well, that then started bringing more and more people here. And so we have this section that is kind of our kids' play area, but it also tells the story of the early settlers that came in and started building up the city. So we have some of the original buildings and homesteads and everything that were developed, our little mock-up of a cabin with the fireplace and everything. But the people came into the swamplands, or I'm sorry, into the oak hammocks, the forests, and they started making a living there. And eventually out of those grew our early villages and towns. So Kissimmee and St. Cloud were the main ones. It's a mock-up of Makinson Hardware, which used to be down there on Broadway. But just the growth and development of that is what we focus on here, the early town. And then, of course, the more that people moved here and became residents, and that also started drawing additional tourism. So the last section over here talks about the tourist industry before theme parks. So this was the main draw for tourists, was the lakes, the fishing, the hunting, and that kind of thing. So that's what we have displayed here in this area. Our eagle's nest up here. That's a good photo op for people. And then finally, just finishing up with our focus on Kissimmee, we have a tribute to some of the businesses that thrived in Kissimmee. The general here was outside one of the pharmacies there. You can see the interpretation on that. We have Tress's newsstand, their original countertop and cash register there. And we also talk a little bit about the Silver Spurs, which was the rodeo that developed and still runs today in the town. And then last but not least, we finish up with talking about some of the more recent influx of immigrants from Puerto Rico and Central America and so forth.
Interesting.
So that's a quick and dirty tour of our museum.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Additional information is available for each exhibit by scanning the QR code that is located there. For additional information on the museum and welcome center, go to osceolahistory.org. Leaving the Welcome Center and History Museum, I continued in the clockwise direction on the Shingle Creek Trail, which will soon lead me back onto the Kissimmee Loop Trail. From the Welcome Center, I'll go another 0.6 of a mile on the Shingle Creek Trail and then get on to the Kissimmee Loop Trail. It'll be another 2.3 miles to get to the bridge over the John Young Parkway. At this point, I am leaving the Shingle Creek Trail and entering back onto the Kissimmee Loop Trail. I'll leave the rest of the Shingle Creek Trail for another video. This impressive structure over the John Young Parkway is a purpose-specific pedestrian and bicycle bridge and is a nice continuation of the Kissimmee Loop Trail. The steel truss, box truss section there that actually spans the roadway between those two large pylons is 220 feet long. The entire structure, including the two helix approach ramps that are on either end, the total distance is right about 1,000 feet. Built at a cost of about $8 million and opened in 2015, the bridge over the John Young Parkway features the name of the city in lighted lettering. From the start of the bridge structure, the path goes about 9/10 of a mile over to Central Avenue. The Kissimmee Loop Trail continues for 1 mile along Central Avenue. To continue on the Kissimmee Loop Trail, turn right and go along MLK Jr. Boulevard for 3/4 of a mile to complete the loop. But today I'm going to continue straight and go down to Broadway. The Kissimmee Loop Trail appears to end here at this point, but it does not. It continues as a sidewalk here. Though not ideal, it is the officially part of the Kissimmee Loop Trail. It goes like this for 1 mile south along Central Avenue and then for another mile west along MLK Jr. Boulevard before it becomes more of what we would recognize as a bicycle trail, a wider path. South of US 192, the traffic on Central Avenue was much less, so I decided to leave the sidewalk and go on Central Avenue, which was much smoother. This is MLK Jr. Boulevard. The Kissimmee Loop Trail continues along MLK Jr. Boulevard to the right there going west. I decided to continue straight, go around the roundabout and continue straight. The street goes straight ahead for about a half a block and then I'll turn left onto Dakin Avenue. At Broadway, I'll turn to the right and go down 1 block where I'll make a quick pit stop before continuing on Monument Avenue for a stop at the Monument of States and then around Lakefront Park and on to the Bill Johnson Memorial Pathway and a stop at the Bataan-Corregidor Memorial before continuing on the Bill Johnson Memorial Pathway along the lake and then on to the Neptune Road Trail. Broadway is the main thoroughfare on what I consider to be downtown Kissimmee. It is a busy thoroughfare with many shops and restaurants and much vehicle traffic. I'll go 1 block along Broadway and turn left on Monument Avenue. But first, coffee. I do really enjoy a good cup of espresso, so I had to make a stop at Buchito, which I understand means a little sip or a small sweetened cup of espresso in Spanish. Buchito is a nice little coffee shop that seemed to have a lot of customers while I was there, and they make a good cup of espresso. Enjoyed my stop. This mural is on the side of the building. These murals are along Monument Avenue. A couple of blocks down along Monument Avenue at the corner of Monument and Lakeview Drive is the Monument of States. The Monument of States was constructed to promote solidarity after the U.S. was attacked at Pearl Harbor. It includes a rock from each of the 48 states that existed at that time, as well as additional stones from around the world. Standing 50 feet tall, it is topped with a 3-foot diameter concrete earth, a bald eagle, and an American flag. Many rocks were donated during its construction, and including some oddities like a cannonball from Michigan, buffalo horns from Montana, brain coral from the Florida Keys. The Monument of States is on the National Register of Historic Places. After visiting the Monument of States, I went along Lakeview Drive to the right and then turned left after about 1 block onto the Bill Johnston Memorial Pathway. At the lakefront, I turn left and continue along the Bill Johnston Memorial Pathway. At the southeast corner of Lakefront Park, I'm going to take a slight detour to see the Bataan-Corregidor Memorial. This refers to World War II in the South Pacific. In 1942, Corregidor Island and the Bataan Peninsula fell to the Japanese. A total of about 76,000 American and Filipino soldiers were made to march 65 miles to a prisoner of war camp. The soldiers were subjected to very harsh treatment by their captors, who forced them to march non-stop with no food, water, or rest. This became known as the Bataan Death March. This memorial depicts a Filipino woman offering water to an American soldier and to a Filipino soldier during the march. Continuing along the lakefront on the Bill Johnston Memorial Pathway. This pathway also coincides with the Florida National Scenic Trail. The Florida National Scenic Trail is 1,500 miles across Florida. It's one of 11 national scenic trails in the United States. This particular one runs from Big Cypress National Preserve up to Pensacola Beach. It's mostly, as I understand, it's mostly not paved. It's for hiking and goes through a lot of rough territory and wetlands. And there's sections of it that utilize the existing bike trails, the paved bike trails like we're on now. The route now turns southeast and goes parallel to Neptune Road. I believe this is also called the Neptune Road Trail from this point down to St. Cloud. It is 3 miles along Neptune Road from the north end of Lake Toho down to the Cross Prairie Parkway. This Neptune Road Trail to get down to St. Cloud is about 6.25 miles to get from the corner of Lake Toho there down to US 192 at St. Cloud. This trail is of the concrete multi-use path, wide sidewalk type of trail, as opposed to the more typical asphalt bike trail. While it's not as smooth as the asphalt trail, it's certainly better than no trail at all. I was unaware that there is presently in construction a roadway project. This project is about 4 miles long and goes from Parton Settlement Road down to US 192. is widening Neptune Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Well, much needed. I was unaware, and when I got down to this point, I started seeing issues, although I thought it would just be a short stretch. So I pushed on. At no time did I see any signs, and the bike trail was not blocked off or anything until I got down to this light. This is at Cross Prairie Parkway, and I checked it out thoroughly. Could not continue on the side that I was on, and I went across the road, across Neptune Road, and checked that out, and there's no way to continue south along Neptune Road. So unfortunately I had to turn around and head back to my starting point to cut this route short. So back along the Neptune Road Trail for about 3 miles, and then along the lakefront for about 0.8 of a mile to get back to my starting point. After returning to my vehicle, I decided to drive down Neptune Road. So starting here at the Cross Prairie Parkway, where I ended my bicycle ride, I rode down through the construction project down towards St. Cloud, and there's definitely no bike paths through this area. Construction is forecast to be ongoing through the end of 2026. A GPX file of my ride today is available on ridewithgps.com under Ed Cycles Kissimmee Loop Trail. A link is provided in the description of this video on the YouTube page. It's a great day for a bike ride, but not along Neptune Road down to St. Cloud. Thanks for watching.